Okay, welcome back to the Modern Revolution. So glad you decided to join us again. Uh, Here we spend time talking to our guests, and instead of asking you to listen to them based on their resume, we talk to them, and I ask you to listen closely. And should you be intrigued, we're going to give you ways in which to find where to learn more about them. Uh, but we're going to, put aside all their accomplishments and all the different things they've done as the preamble, and instead, we're just going to have a conversation and talk about what they're trying to solve in the world and what ways they're trying to help. So with that, I'm very lucky today. Thank you, Daina Rasutis. If I got that right, we were practicing before we recorded. So welcome. I'm so glad you spent time with us today.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me.
We um, we like to begin, Dinah, with the notion of just sort of in a simple way, in a way that's as kind of succinct as you can make it. Have you tell us what problem in the world are you trying to solve?
I am trying to improve people's gut health
Okay,
through nutrition, lifestyle, diet changes. So, helping them just improve their overall health by focusing on the gut.
by focusing on the gut.
Mhm.
Well, we have a lot to talk about, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so much to that, and I don't know that everybody like knows what you mean when we're talking about gut health, right? So when I think of the gut, I think of the enteric nervous system. I think of like that there are more brain cells or neurocells right in the gut than there is in the spinal cord and brain, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think of like people maybe misunderstanding like a gut feeling actually has something that's related to an intelligence separate from what we think of as in our brain. So I say that in my own education of learning about, what does it mean to have gut health? Those were things that surprised me, and so consequently, they changed how I hear gut health. But could you tell us, like, when you talk about gut health, what are you talking about?
I think you hit that very closely to what it is. The
Okay.
so many connections between the gut and the rest of the body. I mean, what you
Mm,
described is the gut brain axis.
okay.
We often think about how our brain health basically affects the gut. Like, yeah, my gut feelings when you get nervous before thinking about
Yeah.
something, right? So our gut's so connected, but it's a bi-directional relationship.
Mm,
So same thing. If you struggle with any type of brain related issues, whether that's anxiety or depression,
mm.
anything like that, it's very likely stemming from poor gut health.
That's fascinating, right? Because I think when we think about those ideas of depression, anxiety, we locate them in the brain
Exactly.
exclusively, right? And so, what I'd like to kind of understand how you got into, wanting to solve that problem. But before you do, it's such a, I think, type of conversation that it could be easily misunderstood. So maybe you could tell a story of like when you worked with somebody who thought it was something, and then you
Mhm.
revealed to them that it's something different than you thought, and they probably resisted that because
Mhm.
we're trained to think about things in certain ways, and when we are challenged, and our first instinct is frequently to go, well, you're wrong, and then that they listened to you and they found some guidance, benefit, and new health, less anxiety, or whatever you addressed. Do you have a story like that?
Oh, yeah. So, although my specialty is gut health, I have a
Hmm.
very soft spot for working with clients with skin conditions.
Okay.
That's what brought me to nutrition, acne, adult acne.
Okay.
So often I have acne clients come to me. They already have a feeling they're looking for a more holistic approach, and they've heard that maybe it's my gut health. Maybe there's something to
Ooh,
do with
yeah.
poor digestion that's making me get these breakouts.
Right.
And we work on their gut health. We literally do no changes, nothing to skincare, nothing with any type of topical,
Hmm.
nothing.
Okay.
And their acne magically goes away.
Wow, this is an inside
Mhm.
job.
Totally, 100%.
Ah, that's fascinating. So um your psychological state, your physical looks, which has a very deep relationship for most of us, that how we appear to the world and how the world receives us, and how we perceive that the world receives us often either alleviates, exacerbates anxieties and whatnot. So there's a lot of things that are kind of tied in together. Before we get on your journey to how you wanted to tackle this problem, is Is there something that is the most common disruption to gut health that I want people to find you after this who may want to delve deeply into this, but in general, like, is there something super common where you're like, hey, you know what, if everybody knew this, there'd
Mm.
actually be an incremental improvement in all of those people's lives if they just understood this?
The first thing I think of, it sounds so simple, but chewing your food and being present
Really?
with your meal.
Okay.
The amount of people that don't do that, pretty much nobody. Everyone, and it's the world we live in. I mean, we're
Yeah.
working at our computers, we're watching Netflix while eating
Yeah.
dinner,
Yeah.
we're whatever it might be, we're always distracted and we don't take the time to actually sit and finish a meal, chew our food, and that would improve your digestion so much. And that's often the first step I take with people. And they think it's so simple, they kind of poo-poo it, like, oh, that's not
Yeah.
going to make
Yeah.
a
Right.
difference.
Right.
It's massive because digestion really begins in the brain.
Okay.
So if you're not paying attention to your food, you're
Oh,
not
okay.
going to be digesting it.
Is there a mechanical advantage to having smaller pieces of food enter your stomach and eventually
Yep.
your okay.
Yep. Because if you're not chewing it, there's no teeth in your stomach, right?
Oh, right, right.
So
Yeah.
then larger food is in your stomach and your digestive system has to do extra work to break it down.
O-
So if you're struggling with any type of bloating, gas, indigestion, first step, chew your food and be present with your meal.
Okay, how interesting. Now I know
Mhm.
before we started you were surprised I was so ancient, and it's true. I am really old. And so as you get to this certain as the decades click on, and we have a tendency to bucket things in decades, like people in your 20s, 30, as if there's like some magic gateway that you walk through at 29 to 30 or 49 to 50. And since I'm in the bucket of 50-year-olds, uh just this is a little bit from my own. I'm getting some free counseling here. The Is the digestive power something that modulates downward as people go on? And is that a foregone conclusion that your digestive power in your 50s is going to absolutely be less than in your 20s? Or is it an accretive thing that over years of swallowing your food whole versus chewing it and whatever else might contribute to poor gut health? Is there, is it unavoidable, or do you see that as like, okay, by the time you get to 50s, now you've ignored it for 45 years,
Mm,
and now you're just reaping the consequences of that. So, or is it somewhere in between? Like, yes,
mhm.
consequences, and yes, age. Like, how's it work?
I'd say it's both, like what you said.
Okay,
But from my understanding, yes, the stomach acid production reduces as you age. So
okay,
that becomes more of a problem as you get older. Because your stomach acid is lower, your digestive power decreases. You're not able to break down that food effectively. And if
okay.
you're not digesting the food effectively, not only might it lead to digestive issues, but you're also not absorbing the nutrients.
Mm,
So nutrient deficiencies become more common.
okay.
So it's sort of what you can get away with a lot more when you're young, kind of how a lot of things work.
Yes, right,
So you can kind of scarf that food down, not pay attention to your meal. Maybe you'll be fine. But as you get older, it almost becomes more and more important to be like, be present with your meal.
right.
Pay attention to these things because your body's just not as strong as it used to be.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right, just one other thing that's sort of like before I ask a more question about your journey, but there's so many things that like come up in this topic that are in our or in our collective consciousness because like a news story might have said something. So how about this notion of part of your gut health issues resides in having undigested food left in your digestive tract? Is that real, or is that just a way to sell medications?
It's I think that's very simplified with
Okay.
how that works.
Okay.
But in a sense, if you're not digesting your food all the way, what happens is it could cause inflammation in the gut. It could cause those food proteins that aren't digested to leak through the gut lining, getting into
Okay.
your bloodstream where your
Mm,
immune system mounts a response. So
okay.
that's a common way that food sensitivities arise.
Right.
So, it's not like there's chunks of food in your gut that aren't
Okay.
digested, unless you're seeing undigested food in your stool, and then you likely have very low enzymes. So that's
Okay.
another topic.
Yes.
But I mean, they can still be microscopic proteins that are still too large than what your body wants to be exposed to.
Okay. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. So the gut lining may be permeable in the sense that over years of mistreating it, it just doesn't create that, I guess, gut blood barrier. I don't know if that's the right term, but that's the notion, right? That there are things in there, and it's people might think of it, oh, you have a hamburger stuck down there, but it's not that. It's that there's residue of previously indigested, properly uh, indigested food, I guess you might say, that's in the way
Exactly.
of you absorbing okay. Well, you have such a, you have such a great grasp, mastery of the subject, but it's a little unusual as a subject, and unusual in the sense that like not people, it's not something you hear people going into as an avocation, or as a vocation, I should say. It's maybe like, oh, it's close to their heart, but to go and actually involve their economic life with it. So I'm just curious, as you decided to work on this problem, was it something that occurred to you in an epiphany, like all at once, or was it incremental over time? Like you had oh,
Mhm.
I'm curious about this, and then over time it built. Like
Mhm.
how did that work?
A lot of people who just get into the space, it's often due to their own health condition. And
Okay.
mine was partially that, partially just my own curiosity.
Okay.
So I come from an engineering background. I'm a civil engineer
Mm,
slash sustainability engineer by training.
right.
And in graduate school was when I started getting interested in food. But it was
Mm,
more the actual recipes, cooking, things like that. So I just had this interest in food and being healthier.
okay.
Had no training in it, but was very curious. And my research focused a lot on agricultural sustainability. So I thought, I love food, I love agriculture sustainability. Why don't I combine it? So
Yes.
then I thought I could be a sustainability consultant for restaurants and help
Right.
them with their sustainability initiatives. So that was my goal after university. I thought, I'm going to go do that. Didn't exactly work out that way. I ended up working in the restaurant field, but more actually, front of house, running events, things like that. And
Right.
at this point, I started noticing my health wasn't ideal. I was in my 20s, should be full of energy, should be looking good because I'm focusing on exercise, eating well, all the things. And I
Right.
had horrible adult acne, and that just
Okay.
got progressively worse. So that's when I started experimenting with diet and realizing, when I cut out dairy, my skin got better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I started realizing food has such an impact on our symptoms. And then I wanted to learn more. So thinking I wanted to become maybe a dietitian,
Right.
I was a person who was literally buying textbooks and going to coffee shops to read for fun. So I thought, I should study this. But looking into dietetics programs, it just wasn't resonating with me because they're not holistically focused. They're not
Yes.
that mind, body, spirit approach. And I just felt something was off. And then I found nutrition therapy.
Okay.
So accidentally found the school that I ended up going to in Denver, Colorado, became a
Well,
student there.
what was the school? What's the name of that school?
Nutrition Therapy Institute.
Okay. Okay. Excellent.
So yeah.
I had went through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition
Oh,
myself,
wonderful.
which is probably not an exact analogy, but in the ballpark of what you went through. So here you were an engineer, someone who like developed and refined your sense of how to analytically approach things, how to have a mathematical approach to problem solving. That there's an answer. So I find it interesting that as you looked at the medical model that I think is dominant, which is to say it's a reductive model that points to a particular answer rather than one that says, well, the answer lies in not just 1 and 2, but 1, 2, 7, 12, 15. And they have having a large palette of things to address somebody with, that then says you can't just do one thing, you have to do multiple things. Were you frustrated, or is it that you found NTI, or whatever the right expression is for that, and you were like, I'm home now, like, okay, I get it.
Oh yeah, it was that. I
Okay.
attended a webinar and it made me cry. So I
Oh,
was
how
like,
nice.
everything clicked. I was like, this is exactly the kind of health I
Yes,
want to practice and help people with.
right. That's okay. So there was a kind of a lead up. I mean, you wasn't all at once, and then some combination of your own sort of interest in, well, why do I look and feel the way that I do, and is there, how malleable is that? Can, if I do this, does something else happen? With the notion that you're not alone in that, that there are other people that you could help, and that being a helper and having a profession around that sounds like you found they matched up, and I think that's really lovely. Um, when you made that decision and you began to help people, what do you think was the strongest status quo that you pushed against? Because I think it's been widely talked about for the last 25 years or so, this tension between a reductive Western
Mhm.
model of medicine, which in my opinion has its place for a certain thing and certain things. And then in other cultures, that maybe predate certain types of science, where they were, I think, encouraged and forced in a sense to look at the body differently. And so I believe the holistic nature of those examinations began because there were not, you know, MRIs and
Yeah.
just, microscopes to the degree we have them now. So when you thought about like, hey, I don't want to go the more traditional route of becoming a dietitian or whatever other things, and you picked this, what was the main status quo that you push against now that you're equipped with this education?
hmm I think it was the lack of preventative
Okay.
care. And that's what really resonated with me for the nutrition therapy aspect.
Okay.
And just getting to conditions before they become a diagnosed disease.
Okay.
Because I don't work with disease states. I don't practice medical nutrition therapy.
Right.
So I work with people who are feeling like crap and they don't know why. But
Yeah. Yeah.
your doctor looks at their blood test, they look perfect. It's like there's
Right.
nothing wrong with you. Or you get a colonoscopy, endoscopy, the doctors say there's nothing wrong,
Right.
but the person knows something is off
Yeah.
balance. So that's where I come in. So I see a lot of clients who have seen the doctors, taking the medications, and they're
Mm.
like, it's not working,
Yeah.
or I want to get off of this because I don't want to be on this for the rest of my life. I want to get that preventative and then go back to that place where my body can heal itself.
When you were in your 20s and had this mismatch of what you thought should be the case and what was the case, I think for many people in all aspects of their lives, I feel like they're the walking well, like they're well enough, they're like, well, I'm okay, but I don't think they recognize how good they could feel.
Exactly.
And I think it'd be an interesting, like, if you have any stories about like what assumptions did you challenge in your clients about, what they assume to be fact? Like, I just don't have the energy that people like you have because it's just the way I am.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, let's work on other things because I was just not built to be an energetic person. I get up, I'm kind of tired, but I slept, I don't know what to say. Like, what type of assumptions do you often push back against in terms of people's self talk, self identification with issues? What are you challenging?
Mm-hmm. The first one I think about is digestion, and that people just accept poor digestion or
Oh,
think it's normal what they're
yeah,
experiencing,
yeah,
whether it's passing gas, every time they eat a meal. Some
yeah,
gas is okay. That's
right,
normal. It's supposed
right.
to happen. But when it happens all day and you need an air purifier in your room because you
Yeah,
can't handle it, it's like I had
something's
to
up.
remind a, yeah, I had to
Yeah,
remind a client of that recently. I was like, remember when you had an air purifier? She's like, oh my God, I did. So that's pretty extreme. But overall, I think energy is a really good example. When people
okay.
just say, I need my coffee in the morning,
Mm,
that's just, I can't get through a day. And then to be able to wean them off caffeine if that's something that they want to do,
yeah.
that's a big one. And then hormonal issues are another one.
Oh,
Women will
yeah.
just accept that they have menstrual cycle symptoms, and PMS is just a part of being a girl. And it's
Right, right.
not. I mean,
Yeah,
many women, if they get their cycles regulated, won't even know that their cycle is coming. And that's the way I'd love my clients to be.
that's interesting. Yeah, that I think, in an age of pharmaceuticals being sold to us via commercials, we're being encouraged to think about things and we're not doctors. And I feel like often um the symptoms of the medicine that they're selling are being offered to us as options as a person, whether or not they're really going to be in our life or not. I mean, I think we're just, which is unfortunate. And in some ways, things like there's a lot of cultural humor that turns on menstruation, right? Like PMS is, oh, it's
Mhm.
unavoidable, and it's an opportunity for whatever the airing of grievances. Make a lot of jokes about like, oh, okay, now we get to the most honest time of our relationship every 30 days where I mean, so I but out of that comes, I think, a lack of, it becomes normalized in a sense that you're like, well, it's just a thing that happens to everybody. I mean, it's not something to be worried about, or just it's just what it is, and I'm comfortable, and so what. So what's been the biggest surprise, like, as you challenge this assumption, that somebody maybe thought, there's no way you can help me with this because my skin's this way, or whatever the issue is, and that's just that. Um, what surprised one of your clients the most?
Well, let me think. I mean, every client is so different. I would say getting people off and helping them transition off of certain medications can be
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
rewarding.
Yeah.
And I'm always working with their doctor. So that's something that
Okay.
they do while their doctor is helping them through it. But something like proton pump inhibitors, where for acid reflux, when people have
Okay.
heartburn,
Oh,
and it's just
interesting.
something that's, I had a client who's been on it for over a decade, which is not supposed to happen because it has all these downstream effects. But for the client to not be able to believe that, oh my gosh, I can have orange juice and not get heartburn and
Yeah.
not be on
Yeah.
my medication, or I can drink a carbonated drink, water, and
Yeah.
feel fine. So just like mind's blown that they spent all these years on this medication with the symptoms that weren't
Yes.
going away. And then we worked together for a couple months and it's gone.
Does anybody have extreme things that they come to you for example, like rheumatoid arthritis? Do you ever see a rheumatoid arthritis client?
Typically, rheumatoid arthritis specifically, not so much, but I
Okay.
have people with, IBD, so inflammatory bowel disease, whether that's Crohn's
Um,
or ulcerative colitis. So they've
okay.
been managed by their gastroenterologist on medications, all the things. But they're same thing, kind of realizing it's not giving them the relief that they're really wanting,
Yeah.
and they know that there's something else they can do. So that's
Yeah.
when we dive deeper.
Yeah. The reason why I ask is that I think in terms of challenging of assumptions, that sometimes people might look at the nature of your work and go, well, that's okay for something small, like, and not, and for example, when I say small, something not totally disruptive to your life or lethal to your life, and I've observed in my wife's naturopathic practice a massive shift in people's quality of life in the rheumatoid arthritis community based many of the things that we're talking about, making changes to their diet where they're talking to somebody who's really talking about managing their medication, then they come to a naturopathic physician who's talking about really what they're eating
Yeah.
before they're talking about anything else. And I'm passionate about the notion that like it all starts with, are you eating well or not? Are you sleeping well or not? And then,
Yep.
where do we go from there? We talked a little bit about chewing, and that's like one thing that somebody could do that like might have an outsized impact. Like, oh, you know what? If you chewed your food more thoroughly, it would help you more than you think it would. What's another sort of small change that somebody might make that they could have unexpectedly positive gains from?
Mm. I would say increasing your breakfast protein and
Oh,
staying away from
interesting.
sweet breakfasts. So
Okay.
really focusing on a savory breakfast
Mm-hmm.
and front loading your protein, because that glucose spike that happens in the morning basically determines the rest of your day. So if
Interesting.
you keep your blood sugar stable for that first morning when you break your fast
Right.
breakfast,
Okay.
it really helps with the rest of your day so you don't have energy crashes, sugar cravings, you're reaching for the pastry, you're reaching for the cup of
Okay.
coffee. So if people, and I like my clients to shoot for usually 30 grams of protein
Okay.
for breakfast, which is a lot. I mean, you'd have to eat 4 eggs to get to
Okay.
30 grams of protein. And most people are having an egg or two on like a piece of toast.
Yeah.
So you really got to focus on getting breakfast protein high. And that makes such a difference for so many people.
Does it show up at the end of the day? Does it show up as as an ability to sleep easier if you start with that? Does that
Oh,
have
yeah,
a relationship? Okay.
definitely. Because if your blood sugar is regulated throughout the day and you're making better choices because of that first choice that you
Yeah, yeah,
made,
yeah. Yeah, right.
that alone, yeah, will improve your sleep a lot.
I like the notion of like the things you're talking about to me point to this notion of the virtuous cycle, and that like you get up, you're exhausted, you load up on coffee, you go to the office, somebody brought donuts because they want to be good to their fellow coworkers, eat your donut, now you're starving, your sugar's crashing on the way into lunch, and so you got to go get some pizza because it's
Yeah.
quick, inexpensive, fills you up, and then you're falling asleep at 3, you don't know what to do, you go home, it's a tough day, let me have some alcohol because it's how
Yeah.
I reward myself. And then you can't get to sleep. And then, well, like there's so many things that are connected in that chain for me that feels very much a part of of the standard American diet. That's a function of circumstance, and that it's the wheels are greased to move in those directions. Whereas to
Mhm.
fight it, you have to be very like intentional in my mind.
Mhm.
Um, well, I mean, the things you're doing, I think because I think if we had a medical system that sat where you sat, like we'll keep you from getting sick, pay us to keep you from getting sick, would be first of all like the most economically rational system. It's a whole lot cheaper to keep people healthy, uh, and we could have like whole reinvigorated agricultural system. You and I share a passion for agriculture, which is another 12 hours I'd like to talk to you about. But I'll be disciplined. Well, as we kind of head towards the end of our conversation, I think that you've had a lot of like really interesting accomplishments, and you've covered a lot of different directions, which I find to be a very attractive quality. Like people not just developed in one way, but they've developed across different boards. But when you think about how you might like people to think about you based on an accomplishment, like what's one thing you've done where you know what, if you're going to talk about me, here's something I want you to acknowledge as like something that I did good in the world.
hmm I mean, it's self-focused, but the fact that I was able to heal my adult acne by just natural methods,
Yeah,
that's what people know me as. My friends, when they see me, when they knew me a couple of years ago when my skin was horrible, and they
right.
can't believe it. Like I'm a different person where we see old pictures. So knowing that I did that, it was a lot of work to figure out what was wrong.
Yeah.
Healing the gut is not an overnight thing,
Okay.
but yeah, I'm very proud of doing that.
Right.
And I think it's inspiring to so many people to know that it's possible.
Yeah, I will say for those of you who may only listen on Spotify or iTunes, wherever you might, if you're not going to go to YouTube and watch the video, what you're saying is hard to kind of like have a point of view on it because you have a very radiant your skin is, like as you could be a skin model, your skin is kind of perfect. So um
Thank you.
yeah, and so the idea that there was a time when this wasn't how you always looked, um I think sk- how the skin on our face in particular, I think is so connected to teenagers that go through whatever hormonal change, and you're already not sure how to act and how people think about you, and now you add that on. It's such a disruptive time that many people go through, may not be avoidable in those years, or maybe you could suppress it, but as an adult, I think you kind of think, oh, I should be past this. And so if you're an adult and you have it, it could really be discouraging in a way that um, I think would be disheartening for many. So the fact that you have this story and then you've decided you want to spend your time helping people, yeah,
Mhm.
that's really wonderful.
Yeah,
Well, let's say someone goes, well, I want to go learn about this and her, and where do you want people to find you?
great. I'm on Instagram. I'm relatively active.
Okay,
Table to Crave is my handle.
that's right. I saw that. Excellent.
And
Table to crave.
yeah, it's a play off of Cradle to Grave,
Of course. Yeah.
back when sustainability was a really big part of my life. So just thinking about everything from cradle to grave, so birth to death, whether that's environmental aspects of life, whether that's health in your body. So Table to Crave is a play on that. That's where you can find me everywhere. Facebook, my website is Table to Crave. I
Okay.
send a weekly newsletter if anybody's interested with all sorts of information, mostly on digestive health, skin health, but
Okay.
also products I love, recipes. So that's
Excellent.
a great way to follow me.
Okay, so if people want to just kind of take a look and get the first blush, maybe Instagram, where so many people like Instagram, as that's where
Mhm.
that. But it sounds like this a way to more deeply engage with you is to uh, join the mailing list, because
Yep.
then you have a way to have a conversation as you go along. So I'd encourage you guys to do that. In fact, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to sign up there. Okay. Well, Dinah Rasutis, thank you so much for joining us. It was a great conversation, and maybe you'll come back in the future, tell us some more.
Thanks, Pete. This was great. And you're clearly so knowledgeable about wellness from a holistic perspective. So this was such a great conversation.
Oh, that's very generous. Thank you. Yeah. Well, here at the Modern Revolution, we like to bring people who have a variety of talents and interests and accomplishments because they're interesting people, and often they settle in on something that's really important to them, and then they move us forward. And I hope that you're encouraged to move your own interests forward, that you get inspired to that thing that makes you passionate, that you then bring your voice into the world, get into the arena with your thoughts, because the modern revolution needs us all.